y'all doing? I'm Breyionna the Afrofuturist, and welcome back to the Black Hand Side. Today I just want to go over my 23andMe results with you all. I know last time I said that I was going to do it, but then everything happened with finding your roots. So if you haven't watched my last two episodes, I highly recommend the Ancestry episode, specifically in terms of relating to this particular episode, so you can kind of see the journey between the two. 23andMe is a DNA company, and I don't say an ancestry DNA company because honestly that is not their primary goal. 23andMe is heavily geared towards research in terms of genetics, but mainly in pharmaceuticals. That's their primary focus. For the sake of transparency, that's something we also have to look at in terms of opting into different research opportunities, because they do give you that option once you make your account. I opted out of research just because, hey, if you're gonna use my DNA to make money, I want to make money too. And there's other reasons too why I opted out, but I just wanted to make that clear. 23andMe is an autosomal DNA company. What does that mean? It means that they look at specific sequences, a certain number of DNA sequences, in order to determine everything you're composed of. Let's say they look at a certain sequence of your DNA, they compare it to their database, and then from there they determine, oh, this particular sequence matches people from Italy, or people from Sierra Leone, or people from the Philippines. So they actually look at different sequences to get an overall idea. Let's kind of get into my results. So let's see. Okay, so first we have a breakdown of sub-Saharan African. And according to 23andMe system, I am 89% African. Sub-Saharan African specifically. Okay, so let's break that down. Then they have that I am 71.7% West African. Okay, so let's go further. And out of all of the regions, countries in West Africa, I am 35.8% Nigerian, 26.9% Ghana, Liberia, Sierra Leone, 2% Senegambian and Guinea, and then 7% broadly West African. Interesting. Okay, so before we move on, let's kind of look at this West African portion. So we have Nigeria by itself, which is interesting. Let's actually click Nigeria. Okay, so according to their map, Nigeria actually only accounts for Nigeria, no other regions. Okay. And then we have, let's pull up the Ghana, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. That's a little more in that too. Hold up. Okay, so it includes Ivory Coast when it comes to Ghana, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. Okay. So we have Sierra Leone, Liberia, Ivory Coast, and Ghana. I wonder why they didn't just add. I won't be nitpicky. Okay, and then so let's look at the map of Senegambia. That's pretty much the West Coast. So I see Senegal, Gambia, Guinea-Bissau. Looks like maybe a portion of, Guinea, the country Guinea. Okay, so that's 2%. And then wow, so the 7% broadly West African, yo, that literally includes all of West Africa, like West Africa and then Northwest Africa. Okay, so we have pretty much that entire region. Mauritania, Mali, Niger, on down to Cameroon, Nigeria, Benin, like that entire section. And then down to Liberia, Sierra Leone and up. That's 7% that they weren't really able to account for. I don't know how I feel about that. Okay, let's keep it going. Congolese and Southern East African. Under this section, I am 16.8%. Okay, so that breaks down, and they have Angolan and Congolese 16.1%, but they were actually able to go a little deeper. So they could actually identify that I actually am of Congo descent. If you watch my last video, you know that I am of Bakongo descent on both my mother and my father's side. So that's interesting to see that they can actually identify that. So it says Congo and Mbundu or Umbundu, depending on who pronounces it. But both of those people are in Angola, Republic of Congo, and then the Democratic Republic of Congo. So I was expecting that. And then we have 0.7% Brali Congolese and Southern Eastern, I don't like the way, Southern East African. I'm Southeast African. Okay, so, and then they have 0.5% broadly sub-Saharan African. Okay. So, interesting. Okay. And they estimate that at a combined 89% for sub-Saharan Africa. Now let's go to Europe. They have me at 9.2% European. So we have Northwestern European, 8.8%, British and Irish, 4.3%. Let's click that. Okay, so that includes Wales. Okay, so it's Ireland, Britain, and Wales. That's the 4.3. And then Scandinavian, which I expected as well. That is 1.5%, and that includes all the Nordic countries. So Norway, Iceland, Sweden, all of those. Okay. And then 1.2% French and German. I'm not really surprised by that either. I mean, I talked about my father's people being Creole from Louisiana. It makes sense that there could possibly be a small percentage of French. And then we have broadly Northwestern Europe. So the same Scandinavian countries. But it looks like this also includes Netherlands, Belgium, France, and as well as Austria. Okay. And then the UK, Ireland, Wales as well. So they weren't really able to determine that 1.8% as being from a specific area. So they gave me a region for that. And then we have 0.4% Southern European. So that is Spain and Portugal. 0.4%, which again, given my father's lineage, it's believable. It's not far-fetched considering the Spanish population in Louisiana. So then we have 0.7% Indigenous American, which I also expected. Also on my ancestry results, that small percent of indigenous heritage comes through as well. And I talk about that heritage and how I came to have that heritage in my bloodline as well in the ancestry DNA video. I also have 0.5% East Asian. And specifically that's Indonesia, Thai, I might mispronounce this, Khmer and Myanmar. That's interesting. A part of me wonders if that's a misread from the indigenous American DNA that I have. The thing that's kind of throwing me off, it says specifically Indonesia. So there's a chance that I could have Filipino DNA from a little further back. And with this being Southeast Asia, but I didn't think I inherited any of the Filipino DNA. But it says Indonesia, so that could be either it's a misread from the indigenous DNA or it's possibly Filipino. So I have some Asian ancestors, but it's so far back that I didn't think that I would have it. But okay, they have a section called scientific details, so let's go further and see what this says. How we match you to genetic groups. Clues about locations, languages, and ethnic groups of your recent ancestors are intended to complement your ancestral background and provide a more recent and detailed view of your ancestry. Okay, more stuff. And let's scroll down. All 260 tested populations. Okay, so what they did was, now it looks like we're breaking down the different regions. So they broke down first Sub-Saharan African, Nigerian. Although we've detected Nigerian DNA in your ancestry background, we have not identified more specific locations that your recent ancestors may have called home. So if you remember the last video, I do have Fulani and Hausa ancestry as well. So it looks like they didn't find, hold up, Houston, we have a problem. Okay, so under Nigeria, the first tested population is Bamileke and Kom peoples. If you know anything about Nigeria and Cameroon, you know that this is a problem because the Bamileke and Kom peoples are not Nigerian, they're Cameroonian. So even though Nigeria says on the map that it only encompasses Nigeria, my guess is that it may encompass Cameroon. And that's a problem when you have it specifically under West African and specifically under Nigerian, because Cameroonian people are Central African. And for the most part, a lot of the cultures are Central African based as well. So I don't know how I feel about that, because the Kom people are basically an ethnic group within the Tikar people. So technically I'm of Kom descent according to the way that they divide up ancestry, but they don't detect it in me, and they have it under Nigeria, and that's 35.8%. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't, specifically because this very well could be 35.8% of Cameroonian heritage instead of Nigerian. I mean, I know I have Fulani and Hausa ancestry as well, but that's not even an option. It's Edo, Ija, Isan, Igbo, Yoruba, and then just Nigeria. And none of those are detected. And Fulani Hausa isn't even an option. That's a little... But I'm wondering if Bamileke and Kom people are the first tested, because there might have been something that made them test that first. I'm not sure, because it's not in alphabetical order. Let's keep going. Let's see. We have Ghana, Well, they tested Ashanti first, and I know that I am of Ashanti descent as well on my father's maternal line, but they could not detect it. Senegambia, Fula, and Wolof. So I am of Fulani descent, and that was the first thing they tested. So I wonder if there was something there, but they couldn't identify 100% that I was. But they did it on Angola and Congolese with Congo. They knew for a fact that I was of Bakongo descent. This is really interesting now. Because then in broadly West African, Cameroon is there. and it's first. And it says not detected. This is not funny, but it's funny. Because it's like, y'all almost got it. Y'all almost got it. Because everything that they tested first is something that's technically a part of me. Because the Tikar and Bamileke people, culturally they share a lot. Ethnically they're still, and genetically they're still a different people. But there are a lot of similarities. So it's interesting that they put Bamileke and Kom peoples considering that. So interesting. And then under the broadly Congolese and Southern East African, they tested the Baka and Biaka people, which if I am of any kind of Bantu outside of Congo, if I am of any other Bantu descent, I would possibly put my money on those Central African people, the Aka or Biaka, and the Umbuti, and some others in Gabon. So it's interesting, but they couldn't identify, so they just say 0.7 broadly. The 0.5% broadly sub-Saharan African, they tested me for the San people. If you know anything about the San, they are one of the oldest ethnic groups in all of Africa. But today they are in Southern Africa. Some people call them the Khoisan people, but yeah, and that's what they tested first, and it says not detected. This is very interesting because they detect nothing as well in the European. So maybe this is something they're building that's not quite there yet. Yeah, because under indigenous, they just have areas rather than actual peoples where they have actual ethnic groups for others. So I don't know. East Asian, they couldn't detect anything either. So 23andMe has a section called All Ancestry Reports. And to me, this is a big difference from AncestryDNA.com, specifically because whereas Ancestry just gives you your estimates per region or country, 23andMe actually also provides you with your haplogroups. Now, I already knew this information, but it's really helpful. So what I was actually able to do was get my haplogroup and then get the haplogroups of my father's side. So I have my father's mother's haplogroup. I could have gotten it through my father, but he hasn't taken the test yet. So I just went through my dad's first cousins, whose mothers descend from his mother, and so on and so on. So they have the same maternal line. So I was able to get their haplogroup as well as their results. And then, of course, mine through my maternal line. Then, so my father's paternal line is of European heritage, which I expected. Like I said, Creole, mulatto ancestors. So it makes sense that that would be European. And we're also working further on my mother's paternal line as well. But for the most part, I've already kind of determined areas of which my ancestors come from. So we have the Tikar people of Cameroon, We have the Fula Hausa people of Cameroon, and we also have the Congo people of Angola, Democratic Republic of Congo, and then Republic of Congo. And then we also have the Ashanti people of Ghana. So that I know comes from my father's maternal line. So how can you do this? Haplogroups. Let's look at that. First, you start with looking at the Bantu migration. The first people to ever walk this earth, the first humans, were African. This group in Africa began to migrate to different parts of Africa. And as they migrated, they created genetic diversity, because if you go to a different region and you stay, the more you have children, the more diverse from the original group that your DNA will be. So you have Africans who were in East Africa, you had Africans who were in kind of Central Africa, and then you had Africans that started to move to West Africa, and then Africans who started to move to South Africa. And then we have the East African group who began to leave Africa and go to the Middle East and Asia. Some of them ventured back possibly. So these different lines started as L, but as they moved to different areas around the world, scientists kind of categorize them as letters. These different letters represent different populations, but also migration patterns. So my specific maternal haplogroup is African, L3E. So because my ancestors started in Africa as L3E, as they were enslaved, sent through the Middle Passage, across the Atlantic, to the Americas, and then to the United States, that created genetic diversity. And you can take it even further, L3E, 1A, 1A. So a lot of people with this specific haplogroup are of T-card descent. As far as 23andMe goes, I love that they actually give the haplogroup option. To me, that's one of the bonuses. 23andMe and Ancestry both get matches. So I talked about matches some in my last video. But the matches for me is probably the best positive for both of these companies. But for 23andMe, I think the haplogroup option kind of puts them up a little bit in terms of things that you can actually do. Outside of that, they also have the parental inheritance. You can upload your parents, not upload your parents' DNA, you can buy kits for your parents and assign them under your own profile, so that in the end they can actually look at your parents' DNA and yours and tell you where exactly you get certain sequences of your DNA and where all of your different ancestry comes from. For Ancestry, your parents have to create their own accounts, and then from there you can go to your matches and kind of compare that way what you have in common. Final thoughts. I don't really know what to think. I mean, it's not like I expected these companies to have the exact same estimates, because at the end of the day, there are estimates. It's humans who are reading these sequences and comparing, you know, so it's kind of up to interpretation, as well as up to the samples that you have in your actual collection, because one company might not have a lot of Cameroonian samples. So that could be why, let's say 23andMe isn't really giving that an option, because they might not have enough indigenous samples from Cameroon to compare my DNA to. But they might have Nigerian samples, so they're like, well, we don't really know which region, so well, let's go Nigeria, you know, because most of these companies actually have a lot of indigenous Nigerian samples. And we know this because there are a lot of Nigerian ancestry videos and 23andMe videos. So it would make sense that their biggest African samples would be from indigenous Nigerians. But the downside to that is, if you don't have enough samples from another country like Cameroon, and diverse samples at that, because like I said, I'm of T-card descent, and T-card wasn't an option. It said Bamaliki and Combs specifically. and that was still under Nigeria. So that would mean they haven't done enough research on the country of Cameroon, or probably not Gabon, because I didn't see that as an option, or Central African Republic, or so it's concerning. But at the same time, we have to look at it like this. There's a company like Ancestry DNA who actually went into Africa, and it's Black-owned company. They went to Africa and collected their own samples. Ancestry and 23andMe can't do that as white-owned companies. So with that being said, it's like they can only do what they can do. So the more people who take the test who are of indigenous African heritage, the better the results can be. But it makes sense why a lot of Africans, indigenous Africans, are not jumping up to take the test, just because of the history. And I think there's still a lot of mistrust amongst Black people to give their DNA to certain companies. So yeah, I can't really be like upset or anything like that, like over this. It's just, these are estimates. I went in knowing that. So I think overall it's interesting. So for the next video, I will be doing my African ancestry results, and I'll talk about that process some, as well as kind of some research, that I'll do on these specific ethnic groups. So I'll share all of that with you all, and then we'll just go to the next company and the next and the next. So I thank you all for watching this video. Love, peace, and light. And as always, next time you see me, give me 5 on the black hand side, y'all.